So if I'm arguing and my case says, hey, look, you took me down for your own good, they fail instantly. It should die right there on the vine because you get no protection.
People don't understand this. If I were to draft a contract for consideration with Libby, where it's like an exchange for something of consideration, I will provide you with something else of consideration. And within it, it is completely manipulative and unreasonable. A judge will look at it and just say, this contract is insane and unreasonable. I'm voiding it.
Yeah, right, like you can't be an indentured servant anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Libby might agree to something and read through this, and it could say something like, in the event of termination of this contract, you agree to pay me $100,000. And then, on page 7, it says, company may terminate this contract at any point for any reason. I'm just going to look at that and be like, you created a contract where you could hire them for a week, fire them, and they owe you $100,000. Yeah. Nice try, dude.
Right.
Throw that out.
Right.
So with these big tech companies trying to pull off all this other garbage, there's a big question about whether or not any of their terms could even hold up in the full picture when it comes to these lawsuits.
Well, keep in mind, too, the terms of service is a contract by adhesion. You just adhere to it. You don't actually agree to it, right? They just kept changing the contract. Have you seen anything recently where it says, updated? No. You're just adhered to it. But unfortunately, a lot of judges will look at that and go, oh, well, you agreed to it. No, I didn't agree to it. From the time that I originally, built my businesses on Facebook back in 2010, 2011, they've changed the contract on, the terms of service so many times. And I'm adhered to that.
Imagine if one day Facebook says in a mass email to all their users, we have updated our terms of service. Please review them here. And when you click it, it's 40 pages of updated terms of service. And in it, buried in page 27 was, you as a user of Facebook agree to give Facebook power of attorney on all affairs and matters related to your life, your next of kin, etc.
Right.
Imagine them trying to go to court to enforce that. Let's take a look at one of the most absurd things imaginable. There was a man and his wife recently. This is a big story. Went to Disneyland or World.
Yeah, this was crazy.
And the woman, I think what was she had? She had a peanut allergy.
She had an allergic reaction.
They made a mistake. They served her a meal that caused an allergic reaction. She died. This man filed a lawsuit, and Disney sought to have the lawsuit moved to arbitration because something like a year and a half prior, he signed up for a free trial of Disney Plus, which said in it that you agree to resolve all disputes with the Disney Corporation, whatever, through arbitration. And they argued that now that he was at Disney World with his wife being dead, the watching Disney Plus for 1 month now takes away his ability to sue. I'm pretty sure Disney lost that one in 2 seconds.
Yeah, they did lose it.
The courts were like, nice try,
thank
dude.
You. Yeah.
You can write look, and they weren't wrong on the face, right? He did agree to the terms that all disputes with Disney would be done through arbitration. And a judge looked at it and was like, that's insane. Nice try.
Plus, no one ever reads the terms of service, ever.
There's a word for this. It starts with a U, and I can't think of the word right at the moment, but that's how unconscionable. It's an unconscionable contract. It's just not possible that's how it would work.
But the other thing, too, is, and to stress this point about reading or not reading, in the movies, they always have these plots where it's like the lawyer's looking at the contract and he's like, whoa, you did agree to this. They've got you. There was, I think it might have been Black Mirror, I'm not sure, where the woman is watching Netflix and then it's literally her life that day being played.
So weird, yeah.
And then she goes to her lawyer and she's like, can they do this? Like, in the terms, it says you agreed to allow them to do this. I just saw that immediately and I was like, if you signed up for Netflix and then they started ripping off your likeness, a judge would penalize them in 2 seconds for manipulative and unfair contracts. They'd say, no. Contracts are intended to be legitimate agreements between two people. You write them down and presumed reasonable. We try to enforce that. But if you manipulate someone who isn't smart enough to understand, like you're a powerful, very wealthy individual who gives someone a 100-page contract and they're a working class Joe, and then you try taking their house from them, the judge's going to tell you to screw off.
Yeah.
Well, one would hope. One would certainly hope.
There are bad jurisdictions for sure. Sometimes the police will falsely accuse you of murder.
And put you in jail for 2 months.
That's right.
Well, let me give you another example, and this really paints this in a better light. If, for example, Facebook decided to change it, Facebook, Google, Twitter, whatever, decided to change their terms of service and they said that black people can't post on our website. just blatantly it's blatantly illegal, right? It's discrimination. That means they violated a law. Now people put that in context. It's like, oh wait a second, they can't write it that way. Exactly. It means that the terms of service are wrong. They're not good. And see, I recognize really early on, and this is how this story progresses into the fight with Facebook. It was 2013. I was making over $300,000 a month, just marketing, doing funny stuff, memes, you name it, and we were just entertaining people. It was so much fun, right? Big marketing, because I had my engagement was in the billions. It was crazy what I could do back in those days. Well, I'm making $300,000 a month, and then all of a sudden their advertising thing kicks in, and overnight I dropped to making $6,000 a month. I absolutely got annihilated. Now, I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't violated any terms of service. They simply shut it off like a light switch. That's artificial manipulation of reach and distribution. It has nothing to do with treating them as a publisher. It has nothing to do with anything other than illegal conduct.
This had to do with them prioritizing ad stuff in the news feed.
Correct. And people think that they're allowed to do it. No. The fact that they're a partner taking money to manipulate content makes them an information content provider, at least in part. Now we're starting to apply to Section 230.
Interesting. Wait, hold on. This is an interesting point. Correct me if I'm wrong. When they make the argument that we are not the speakers of this information, right? This is the argument. They say Section 230 protects a platform for the speech of third parties who use that platform. I'm being very rudimentary on this one, but the general idea is if I go on X and I say that Libby kicked a dog, you can't sue X for my speech. I defamed Libby, not X. However, X made money off that with you as a partner in the distribution for the purpose of monetary gain.
Got it.
They absolutely are party to that speech.
You got it.
That's massive.
Yeah, there's more to it. Can you pull up Section 230? I know this is a bit technical.
26 words that changed the internet.
Yeah, more like the 26 words that blew it all up. Actually, it really comes down to one. I mean, I'm going to show you exactly how this is. Can you zoom in on 230 C1 and C2?
Let me.
You're at it.
No, this is a different one.
No, that Cornell's perfect. Cornell's perfect.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
All right, you said section
C1 and C2.
C1. Let me zoom in.
There you go.
No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider.
All right. So,
and C2 is no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be held liable on account of any action voluntarily taken in good faith to restrict access or availability to material that the provider or user considers to be obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, otherwise objectionable, et cetera, et cetera. Any action taken to enable or make available to information content providers or others the technical means to restrict access, yada, yada.
Yes. So most people can't do this, but we're going to get a little technical here, but I want people to see this, right? Because this is definitively broken. We actually can point it out. Oh, we lost it.
No. I pulled up the definition of information content provider as I think it's particularly
this
relevant.
is the other portion.
The Cornell defines information content provider as any person or entity that is responsible in whole or in part for the creation or development of information provided through the internet or any other interactive computer service.
Yeah. So let's walk through this, okay? First line, 230C, protection for, quote, Good Samaritan blocking and screening of offensive materials. Now, this is the actual law. It's a representation of it through Cornell, but this is how it's written in the law. This is what protects big tech, all of them, right? You see Good Samaritan's got quotes around it. Mm-hmm. Nobody talks about that, do they?
Is there a legal definition of Good Samaritan?
See, there doesn't need to be. The thing is that why are quotes on anything? Why do we quote something?
It's coming from somewhere.
Bingo. It's coming from somewhere else. You're quoting somebody. So who are they quoting? They're quoting Congress. Mm-hmm. So an affirmative defense, right? Do you know what an affirmative defense is? Like self-defense?
Right.
I'm sure you're familiar with it, right?
If you're arrested for a crime, an affirmative defense is, under the law, I am allowed to do this for these reasons.
Correct. You commit an otherwise unlawful act that is absolved, but the burden of proof shifts to the defendant to prove that they acted within the confines of self-defense, meaning the basic premise of it is that they acted in their own defense or the defense of others, right?
Pertaining to self-defense, and there's a bunch of other areas where the truth is an affirmative defense for defamation, things like that.
Yes, some would call that a general provision. but it actually has a formal name. It's called an intelligible principle. Easily understood principle for an affirmative defense, right? And Section 230 has one too. It's right there in quotes. That is what Congress's full intent was. They said that they have to be Good Samaritans. And while it doesn't have a legal definition, the basic premise of Good Samaritan is easy to understand, that they're not acting for their own good. It's the entire premise. Mm-hmm. So if I'm arguing and my case says, hey, look, you took me down for your own good, they fail instantly. It should die right there on the vine because you get no protection. Mm-hmm. But see, there was another problem. There's been 2.5 decades since this thing was written, this law.
What was it, 92?
96.
It was like Bill Clinton, right?
Yeah, 96 is when it was modified. 97 is when you have the...
I believe it was the Wolf of Wall Street was the reason for its creation.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
They got held. It was... I can't think of his company's name off the top of my head. But essentially what happened is that they held themselves to be family friendly and they were taking down content. And then the content
Prodigy?
that they
Wasn't
missed.
It Prodigy?
It was so it's the Wolf of Wall Street who helped create Section 230. What had happened was a very simple version. You may have to correct me because it's been a while since we went over this, but there was a website that talked finance, and in the comments on the website, someone said something defamatory.
Yep.
So they sued, saying that's your website, you're hosting the speech, and they said we didn't write that. That's a user. And so Congress was like, whoa, we can't have you suing a website because a user made a comment. Mm-hmm. Here we are.
Yeah, but they made a public representation that they were actually going to keep it clean.
Well, and I think they were trying to for the most part, and they missed some.
There's the point.
Yeah.
And keep that in your head when we go into the next of this part. Miss something, meaning they didn't do anything. They failed, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't see it and allow it. And I can prove that this is all going to be right at the end. I'm going to show you the cases even. The law is changing, and we know it's changing because it's already happened. So if you look at 230C1 again, it just so happened, this is actually how it came about. The courts dismissed my case under C1. Now, I was arguing that they took down my content in bad faith, right? So that should apply to C2A, shouldn't it? Because they took any action to restrict my materials in bad faith. Mm-hmm. Except they didn't. They didn't even bring a C2A argument.
This is actually really interesting. C2A says any action voluntarily taken in good faith to restrict access to or availability to material that the content provider or user considers to be obscene, lewd, blah, 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 blah. No provider shall be held liable on account of.
Right.
So what
this is the liability protection.
So this is interesting. This means that if any of these big tech platforms take you down in bad faith.
Right.
And we can define that, especially in West Virginia, there actually is bad faith.
It goes back to being a Good Samaritan, though. Good faith as it relates to being a Good Samaritan.
But to put it very, very simply, it seems as an argument that if you are restricted in any way unrelated to these things,
right,
you may actually have cause of action.
Correct.
So the argument for the protection is that you are being lewd and lascivious. But so I knew a guy 10 years ago. He had a business online, and I forget what his service was. He made 6 figures, older guy with a family. And he said it's because when people Google search for his service, he's in the top 5. Mm-hmm. Google changed the algorithm, removing him from the front page. His business was gone overnight.
Right.
That is not a good faith restriction of his content, which he was in this real estate.
Right.
So this would be akin to you going to the city, filing for a permit to open a food truck in this parking lot, and they guarantee you, they say, yep, permit is good. You can operate here. This land is good for 10 years. And then one day you show up and they've towed your vehicle out to the countryside where there's no people anymore. And you're like, whoa. You've shut me down without cause.
Yeah, I built my business based on what you said to do. So I built it and then you took it from me? Exactly.
This is getting really crazy. I think the craziest thing about this, in fact, is that I have not heard it argued, but I believe it is true and correct. And I think a reasonable judge would agree. Now that we're in the era of shared profits on social media, that is to say, there are many people who produce content on YouTube whose sole 100% income is YouTube's ad sales. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, but I believe that makes them a party to the information content provider definition, which is in whole or in part responsible for the creation.
You're starting to catch on.
If there is a person who films documentaries and it requires them to spend $2,000 to fly to a location, And YouTube is the one selling ads for YouTube on YouTube's platform for this individual who then uses the revenue generated from the content they produce. YouTube is half. They are half or
They're a party.
They're
In
a party
part.
to the creation.
Right there, in part.
It probably wouldn't be created if it wasn't for them enabling the revenue source.
Well, I think any reasonable judge is going to say, in fact, it is true. We know this to be the case. YouTubers have articles for the last decade about how much money they make on YouTube solely. This makes YouTube party to that creation. Now, hold on. If we have a sponsor, let's say it's a candy bar company, and they sponsor the content, I would argue that is not in part responsible for the creation of the content, as they are simply selling on what already exists.
Right.
They say, you have a show, it gets 100,000 views, we'd like to put ours in the beginning of a show you've already made. If in the instance they say, you're going to be launching a show, you expect to get this much, and we want to sponsor the show, I still would argue sponsorship would be exempt from this. The issue here is that YouTube is the platform by which you are putting the content on, and YouTube is Google's parent company.
Party. They control it.
They control the site. Can people see it? They control whether or not ads get sold against it.
Yep.
So not only are they generating the revenue, we can make the argument that Google says, no, look, Google ad sales will sell an advertiser for you, but we're not the ones making them, putting the money towards it. It's the advertiser. And then my response is, YouTube decides whether my video will be viewed or not to generate that money. And if YouTube removed me, the sponsors would not buy, I would make no money. So by you, algorithmically or by choice, putting me on front page or recommended or otherwise, while another subsidiary or a sister organization in Google is doing the revenue generation, you are a party. You are an information content provider, and you are legally liable for the speech said by all of these channels.
You nailed it. Now, do you want me to tell you where the courts went wrong?
Where'd they go wrong?
This is where it goes wrong. So you know that they took down my content in bad faith, right? So that should have been a C2A consideration. They should have looked at it that way.
Let's pause. Define bad faith.
It's irrelevant. And I'll explain why in a second. The reality is that let's take different words from that. They restricted access to or availability of my materials, did they not? They shut down 6 of my pages, all of my content, shut down my business and so forth. They took me down. That's a C2A consideration. They didn't advance a C2A defense, though. They advanced a C1 defense.